Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And I am not on all those boards right now. I have, some of them have been in the past, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming out at 7:30 in the morning to listen to someone speak about something. But I am delighted to be here. I have been involved with Otterbein, and I've actually attended a number of the Ross Leadership Hours, and I've always learned something. So I'm hoping there may be just a tidbit you might learn today. But today, for the maybe 30 minutes, what I'd like to share with you is my leadership journey, because it's a winding road, and I've learned so much along the way. So for a little bit of time, if you just indulge me, I get to, or if I could indulge you in a little bit of traveling back in time, because I think in order to really understand where I am today as a leader, and more importantly, our company is in this community, have to kind of give you a little bit of history. Now, oh, that's good that my phone's ringing. Very important is how our paths, my path as an individual and our companies kind of came together in a very strange and wonderful way. And I couldn't be happier with the outcome, but it wasn't meant to be. So I want to take a little bit down memory lane, and all of us have transitions in life. So I want to share a little bit of my transitions, which really helped me as a leader, and where we are today as a company and where we're going forward. So I was raised in Columbus, Ohio. This is my home where I spent all my life. I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and then I have lots and lots of cousins. But I didn't stay. I almost can reverse those. I left home and went to Northwestern for my undergraduate, but then I learned that I actually wanted to go into business. So I transferred back to Ohio State, where I got my undergraduate degree in business administration, spent some time working here, and then went back up to Northwestern, to Chicago, the city I love, and got my MBA. Now, interestingly enough, we had this great company that I'm going to talk to you about called Crane Plastics. But my father and his brother, who were running the company at the time, had decided that they had a wonderful management team, and they didn't want to really do anything to harm that. So they instituted an anti-nepotism policy. So the beauty of that, it allowed all of us as kids to follow our passion, to follow our dreams. I didn't quite get it at the time, because we had lots of friends who had family businesses, and they just had that career right into the family business. But what we discovered was how much we learned outside of the family business, making it on our own, and then coming back made a lot of sense. So I, as John talked about, I found my way. I was in Chicago after Northwestern, and I began work for AT&T in national sales. This was a remnant of a discussion I had with my father, who said, you have to have sales. Everyone has to have sales, which for me, it turned out to be true. It really allowed me to project, to accept failure all the time, every day, how to close the deal, because it's not just in sales, it's in everyday life, right? So I went to AT&T, but then I landed on my dream job. Anyone's dream job, running Cap'n Crunch. So I did have to make it up through the ranks at Quaker Oats. I graduated at Northwestern with marketing and finance. So consumer products and product management was right in my sweet spot. Very tough to get into, but landed as a marketing assistant on Aunt Jemima frozen waffles. Then I moved up to new cereals as an assistant brand manager, but then landed Cap'n Crunch. And what could be better than targeting all your products, all your material to 9 to 11-year-olds, with a secondary audience being college kids. So I got to go to college campuses, and I also go to focus groups and hear little kids talk about what they like to see in the boxes, and everything I did was targeted to those little eyes on the aisle, this, mommy, buy me Cap'n Crunch. So we had a ton of fun. And from a leadership perspective, it was really like running my own business. And it taught me so many things. First of all, how to be a leader, how to work in a Fortune 500 company, and thinking strategically while reporting quarterly earnings is interesting to navigate. And then also with kind of product management, I had kind of responsibility for manufacturing all through distribution, but I didn't have reporting responsibility. So how to influence without having direct control. It really taught me about teamwork. It really taught me how how to get things done. I had really good bosses who allowed me some leverage, and I had really bad bosses who I actually thank today. Back then, Kristen, I could have killed her, but she really taught me what I didn't want to be as a leader, but it really taught me so much about teamwork, what sometimes ambition does to people negatively, but I was in heaven. I mean, Captain Crunch, I want to stay forever. But then came if you can't read this, the 3-year Chinese torture. And I looked up actually bamboo shoot torture. It was really gruesome on the internet. So I do not want to show that. But it felt like that. For 3 years, my father started calling me, say, why don't you come back to Columbus? Why don't you come work for Crane? Now, remember, we had an anti-nepotism policy. But finally, my father and his brother were in their 60s. This is true for so many family businesses, right? They're doing great. Things are going great. They don't have time to slow down to think about what next and what happens with succession planning. Although they had a wonderful advisory board who finally started tapping them and saying, what are you doing with the company? I'll go back to that. What are you doing with the company, and who are you going to pass it on to? Because during that time, our company, thankfully, continued to grow. We had about 500 associates, the south side of Columbus. And so the question was, should they sell it? They had no kids in the business. So they sell it, should they go public, or remain a family-owned business? This had been 50 years in the family. And so after 3 years, a phone call every Sunday night, and the last being a vacation in Hawaii. I was now married, happily, and actually pregnant. This caused the emotions. And little notes would be slipped under my door on vacation, a family vacation, like, can we talk today? It was the day before we were leaving back home. Can we just have a final conversation? And anyway, we got back to Chicago, and we got off the plane, and my parents were going on, and my dad gave that look. We got back to Chicago to a newly rehabbed old home in the 1920s, and we walked in and said, we got to do this. So in 1987, we came back it was a package deal. My husband and I came back to Columbus, 7 months pregnant, and joined Crane Plastics on the south side of Columbus. And 32 years later, here I am, which is actually remarkable to me. So pause on me. Now let me show you the parallel path of our company, because it is extraordinary. We're celebrating our 72nd year in business today, and it wouldn't be without my grandfather. So there he is, Robert S. Crane, Papu, as we affectionately called him, born in 1889 in Lebanon, Ohio. He was a serial entrepreneur. I mean, he was in so many different businesses. I always ask my parents, tell me about, Papu. But the most notable was, he was a designer of light fixtures. And about 7 years ago, we found a portfolio of tissues that had dozens of beautifully hand-drawn designs of chandeliers. The most notably is the main chandelier in the Ohio Theater was my grandfather's design. And once a year, they pull it down to clean it, and we go there to celebrate my grandfather. So that was in the 1920s, and he tinkered in everything. But like so many people back then, the Depression hit, and they lost everything. My father and my uncle share the story of them, he and the two of them and their sister sitting on the curb. They lived in Upper Arlington in a nice home, and all their furniture being taken out. I have no idea what that would feel like. They lost it all, had to move into an apartment, and that's where they lived their formative years. My grandfather didn't work for about 15 to 20 years, but he finally found a job right behind our now Columbus Museum of Art downtown, and I would call it a shack, but a little hut where post-war in the 40s, they were extruding plastic for lots of parts of business. And so they're probably, well, some of you probably know the name of the movie, The Graduate. When Dustin Hoffman is a new graduate from college, and he's taken aside by one of his father's friend, and the guy said, I want to tell you one thing. just one word: plastics, my father's favorite movie. And so my grandfather started working extruding, and they were making inserts for countertops in kitchens, decorative shapes, decorative pieces of extrusion. My grandfather, being entrepreneurial, realized that they were not satisfying customers' demands because they were growing and growing. So he asked if he could borrow a machine on the weekend and serve some customers. And his boss said yes, and it grew to the point where my grandfather borrowed $500 from the secretary, June Taylor, and started his own business called Taylor Technology, Taytech. And we always think that's the funniest story. We've never found June Taylor, but he moved to the South Side, and in 1947, Crane Plastics was started. He quickly recruited my father, who's on the left of that first picture on the left, and 10 years later, my uncle. And that really started the journey of Crane Plastics. Now, they only had one extruder, but in 1956, another name you may or may not remember or know, too young, is Art Linkletter. He started a craze. He had lots of TV shows. He started a craze called the hula hoop. It was so wildly popular on the West Coast that he had frontmen that traveled across the United States in advance looking for extruders to make this newfangled toy called the hula hoop. We were the beneficiary. They paid us in advance. It actually financed our second extruder, and we made hula hoops for a year. And that was only a year, but it was such fun. And then we formed a partnership with Andersen Windows, and almost the rest is history. We had a 60, 70-year continued relationship with Andersen Windows where we made lots of parts and pieces for them. And then for Marvin Windows and for Steelcase and for many, many, many other companies. And so the company grew dramatically through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And this is a later picture of my dad and my uncle. And I'll tell you, I think I may have learned almost every other leadership lesson from the two of them. They're brothers. They were brothers. My dad passed away in '92. They were best friends, and they were great business partners. They were almost a little bit like yin and yang. Sometimes I call it the good cop, bad cop. I don't like to say it because I'm a lot like my father. He was the bad cop. So my uncle was the charismatic leader, never forgot a name. He's 93 and still never forgets a name. Still comes into work, but I'll share that a little bit later. But he could never make a decision, still can't. Hard to make a decision, needs consensus of so many people. My father was a decisive one. He really had the business plan. He really understood the bottom line. He was still wonderful, but he was a little bit tougher. So they really had a great relationship over the years. And in the 70s, or actually before that, in the 50s, our company was the very first to design and patent vinyl siding dye. So I'm so embedded in this industry, but vinyl siding really took off post-war and became the predominant exterior siding for the United States. And we were the first to design it. Unfortunately, we weren't the first to the market, but we did a lot of outsourcing. We made vinyl siding for others. In the 70s, we started making and selling vinyl siding under the name of Vipco, which changed over the years. So, as I said to you, in the 80s, in the mid-80s, they came upon a decision point, a turning point about what to do with the business. And there started the 3 years of calling, because what they wanted their children to do, we did. So I have two brothers that are doctors. My sister and I are both in product management. On the other side, there was a lawyer, a journalist, a teacher. So we are all passionately involved in other geography and other businesses, careers, families. And it really became the turning point of the organization. And as you heard, I was happy, very happy at Cap'n Crunch. But through the next 3 years after that, they not only secured me and my husband, but my sister's husband. They moved back from Chicago. And then my lawyer cousin, Mike, joined the business as well. So there's my Uncle Jim sitting in the center, and that's a lovely picture of me. standing next to my oldest cousin, Jay, my brother-in-law, Tim, my husband, John, and then Mike Crane on the far right. So we all joined the business and really spent the first 3 years marveling at what our fathers had done. They had really grown a magnificent business. And just as a reflection back when I lived in Chicago and working for Captain Crunch, or even before that when I was in school, I would fly home weekends and inevitably take the cheaper flights, which would get me in at 11 o'clock or midnight. My dad would pick me up and we'd go down to the plant every time. And he wanted me to meet everyone that worked there. And what was remarkable was he knew everybody's name. It was, again, another lesson in leadership, really about treating, as part of our core values, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but it's about treating everyone with respect and dignity. And that was taught at an early age for me, but always reinforced when I would visit the company, that not only did he know their names, he knew if they just had a baby, if their son just won a baseball game. Now, granted, it was a little smaller, but it was pretty impressive that on third shift, they didn't wear name badges then. So we joined the company. And after reflecting on how great a company it was, as we were entering the 90s, in the mid-90s, overall, the economy started slowing down. And we realized that, we had this great company. We were all invested in plastics and all in building products. So we really felt like we needed some diversification. We also realized that this company had never really focused on strategic planning. As a private company, they had their operating business, they worked on operating plans, and they worked with the here and now. And who could doubt what they did, because they built a great company? But we were trying to look forward. And a lot of us in our days of business worked on strategic plans. So the old "not created here" also was embedded in our company, like outside consultants. Are you kidding? But we said we really needed a fiduciary board. They had this advisory board, which were some of their fellow business folks in the community. They also had lots of family members. So we had about a 13-member advisory board, which were mostly family, and it weighed down on us. It was very difficult to make business decisions. So we actually did bring a family business consultant in, which was helpful to us. And they helped us discern the difference between a fiduciary board that really worked on business and a family council or a family board. They really focused on the family and family's education about the business as shareholders and how the family could work together over the years. Because the number one reason that family businesses don't pass to the next generation is a lack of communication and a lack of really understanding what their role is. And as the business was being passed to the third generation, the statistics were a little daunting, that typically 12% are successful in moving to the third generation. Moving to the fourth generation is a 2% success rate. Now, here in Columbus, we're blessed to have some great companies like White Castle, Shedinger Funeral Homes, that I think are in fifth generation and sixth generation. So it happens. But we watched too many businesses not make it. So we were really focused on ensuring the success. So the first thing we did was to start a fiduciary board. And the best practice was more outsiders than insiders. So we kind of matched that. We have 4 outside directors. My cousin Mike and I are the 2 insiders. We do have a family council, and that's our entire family, which I'll show you a picture in a moment. But there are 58 of us, but some are too small to really have a voice. So anyone over 18 years old is in our family council. And so we have a rotating family council member every 3 years, which is really healthy for the company. And then my 93-year-old uncle and 94-year-old mother are ex officio members, and we are delighted to have them on our board as legacy, as continuity, and as wisdom. And then finally, we have 2 permanent guests, our CFO and our president of our investment company. That has really helped us sharpen our wits. We also took our 70-year-old company, or I guess 60 at the time, and said we need to focus on our businesses, our Crane Group businesses, And then we have a passive investment portfolio that we were managing on the side. And so we kind of brought it up under the umbrella of Crane Group. So now we have a group of operating businesses that I'll share with you, an investment portfolio that consists of stocks and bonds and real estate and private equity, and some ownership in sports teams. I call them charitable investments, and the like. So we took Crane Plastics, which actually over the years had morphed into some skunk works underneath it, and we actually blew up the company in 1999-2000. There was almost mutiny, but we survived, and I always say this should be a Harvard business case, but we took this Crane Plastics company, blew it up into 6 LLCs, took folks who didn't have the last name of Crane, and they became president and CEOs with equity. They owned a piece of that business. So our legacy Crane Plastics business was one of those. Our siding business became one. We had a Skunk Works project that was a wood composite decking business that we knew was going to be big, that we grew organically, but it just could not flourish under our original structure. It became TimberTech, which became the second largest wood composite decking business in the US. It became its own company. And then we had 3 others, a couple that were treated as passive investments. In '95, we had bought Able Roof. But we treated it as a passive investment, and the folks that ran it, Steve Weil, who was a founder, continued to run it. We decided to bring that in under our portfolio to more actively manage it. We also had a business called Suburban Steel and another business called Signature Control, which was a gate business. So that was a huge change. We took all the employees of Crane Plastics, and they were actually drafted into positions in each of those businesses. So they all had their own HR. The only thing they shared was IT. It was crazy bedlam during a summer of 2000. But today, that was the basis from where we were to where we are today. And so now, today, fast forward, so I shortened up the history a little bit. We have 4 operating businesses. And so the one that you would know was under the umbrella of Crane Renovation Group. And underneath it are 3 companies. One is our residential roofing business called Able Roof here in Columbus. But we're in 4 different states, 6 different locations called Mr. Roof. Very descriptive, isn't it? And so we operate residential roofing businesses in Louisville and Lexington and Cincinnati and Ann Arbor, Nashville and Raleigh and other places. And we're rapidly expanding. Our goal is really to be a national roofing company. Another business that we acquired in 2006 is Contractors, Inc. They're based in Memphis, Tennessee, but they're also in about 8 different states. And they work with property managers of apartment complexes. And they mostly work with the customers called REITs, which are real estate investment companies that own these apartment complexes. And they're the ones responsible for repainting, re-roofing, new windows, whatever an apartment complex needs. Basically, contractors, they're like contractors. They go in and do the work. It's been a very successful business. And then just a couple of years ago, we got into a mitigation business. If there's a flood, if there's a fire, if there's mold, if there's something else in hotels and other environments, responsive, our company is called in right away to get a tarp over it or to dry it out. And then our Contractors, Inc. conveniently will come in and put things back in order. So it made sense to us. That's our largest company. And then followed by Sensit Technologies, a business based out of Valparaiso, Indiana. And it has customers like energy and utility businesses, first responders. It's gas detection. So whether it's on a first responder when they move into a home with a fire, it will detect up to 5 different gases. For a utility company or another kind of company, on the service they can go wand and see what's underground. Again, a very successful business and growing business. These are some of the handheld, and they have handheld devices and also big devices on trucks and trailers that they can go over ground rapidly. Then we have an interesting company called Screen Machine Industries, SMI. It's just located in Etna, Ohio. If you're on 70 East going or over 310. It's the big, large building on the south side, and sometimes people recognize it. We build these machines that are larger than this room. In the fall, during Ohio State football season, so we crush, I'll show you another picture. We crush with these big crushers, then we screen to different sizes of material and convey them. So in the fall, in our side yard, where we sometimes have inventory, I don't like to see inventory there, but they'll inevitably, with their screeners, do OHIO with these huge machines, and I'm so worried we're going to be cause of a significant accident on 70. We haven't, so now you have to look for it. So we make these big crushers and screeners, which are magnificent machines, and it's a really great industry. And then finally, just about 4 years ago, this was a pet project of mine, but we acquired a company based out of Jacksonville, Florida, called Pet Paradise Resort and Spa. It is a slightly upscale boarding for dogs and cats, and day camp and a spa, grooming. And just recently, we've added vet services to it, which has been a real win for us. And there's a kind of a topographical picture of every year now we're building 8 to 10 of these all across the Southeast. We're up to about 38, and we hope to have 50 in the next 4 years. So it is a huge business, and I won't go into all the other puns that I have, but you might ask, what is the synergy between pet boarding, gas detection, these huge machines, and roofing? Nothing, except the commonality, and I'll get to this in a minute, is one is culture and core values. Every one of these businesses really care about their people and treat their people the way we want to be treated, and they have great leadership. That's a commonality. Also, we look for categories that are experiencing rapid growth and companies that have a unique attribute, whether it's a patent or a technology or a team. We look for that. So with all that, the 4th generation joined the business. And these are the two, and they look just like that. Joined our company about 5-6 years ago, and we were delighted because, like us, we don't have an anti-nepotism, but we highly encouraged our next generation to follow their passion. And their passion could be to join us right away, or their passion could be to go to New York or go to Chicago or become a social worker or a lawyer or a doctor. That was most important to us. But we hoped somewhere amongst those 4th generation that some would find their way back to Columbus and back to Crane. And these two did, Brian Westwater and Dan Crane. Unfortunately, Brian, the one on the right, left us just about a year ago to pursue his own family business. His wife, Leah, had started yoga studios. And so now they have their own family business. So now we just have one 4th generation. I hate to say this, but I've started my own Chinese torture of my daughter, who lives in New York, hoping that she will, with her husband, move to Columbus someday. So I'm just waiting for her to become pregnant. Then I'll really work on her emotions, get her back here. So this is just a sample. It's not all 58, but that's our family, 4 generations, now 5 generations. We have 8 5th generation. They don't have a voice yet, but we're working on it. And the good news is we actually all get along, and we actually like being together. And that's not easy when you have 4 generations spread across the United States, don't get together that often, but they're all shareholders and owners of our business. So it's absolutely essential that we're all on the same page, that we all have the same values, and that we're all moving forward. Because I witnessed close friends who have had significant disharmony and has broken up not just a company, but it's broken up a family. And we just will not allow that to happen. So today, I love what I do. I mean, how could it be any better than being the head of a family business, having a wonderful family, a very supportive family, and an incredible community to be in. So what I focus on now is really developing great leaders, because I'm not going to be around that much longer. When I'm talking to some students sometimes and I talk about our company being 72, I do remind them that doesn't mean that I'm 72, but they just know that I'm old. So I think the greatest joy in my life, besides my family and my children, is really developing great leaders, because that's what's going to help our company to move into the future. And so we are located, our Crane Group headquarters are located downtown in the Arena District in the old Belmont building, which is in 1888, the Belmont Casket Factory. It's got a lot of ghosts, but it's a really great place to be. It just thrives on small businesses there in the building. And we have been able to recruit some wonderful, young, diverse leaders that will take our company into the future. I'm also mentoring the 1/4 generation, working on see if I can get a few more, because that's important to me. I don't want to be in a position that our parents were, that they waited until their mid-60s to say, what should we do? We've been working on succession planning for some time. We want it to be seamless. Mike and I want to be able to just trot off into the pastures and allow this next generation and our leadership to really take us to new heights. The interesting part is that our next generation won't be ready for my position yet, so we'll have another transition that I'm working with our board and our family on. We'll have an outside, probably CEO of our company for a time being, and that will be different. And being the leader, guiding our board, guiding our management team, and guiding our family through that transition is also what I spend a lot of time on. And really exciting is long-term strategic planning. What's our next, what we call a platform business? We're in the middle of looking for our next business. And as I shared with you before, most important to us as a family company is values. We hire on values. Our assessments for hiring have our core values embedded in it. We have our performance reviews that have our values. All of our training, we have our VAL training is value-added leadership, is based on that. It's nothing great shakes, but it's treating people with all of our people, whether it's of our associates, our customers, our vendors, the community, with respect and dignity. It's about communication, being up, down, open door policy we've had in place forever. My dad and my uncle were always so proud that we never had a union vote. Back in the 60s, 2 unions tried to enter, but I think it was based on our communication, our associates feeling like they were part of our family and treating our associates so well. My dad's claim to fame was that, I don't know, the union guys were trying to come in the driveway and my dad ran over one of their toes. I'm like, I don't think that's really not a great story. But anyway, they were just happy that not anti-union, but more in terms of running a solid business where people felt a part of something. We encourage a sense of family and a sense of teamwork. I learned in my early days at Quaker Oats how important teamwork was. So everything we do, and you look, the millennials today is all about teamwork, and so that we really live by that. We want to share the rewards, and we were one of the first companies in Columbus to offer profit sharing in 1969, cash profit sharing twice a year. So all of our companies have profit sharing. And as we look at any company in the future, they will as well. Because we believe so firmly that if someone feels that everything they do, they're going to get that reward as well. So that's part of the, as my dad used to always say, that's the glue that binds our company together. We want to be the best place to ever work. We have annual engagement surveys. We really work at it. And sometimes there are issues. We're having some issues in some of our companies, and they're focused and bring the whole company together. It's one thing to have a survey, but it's another one to share the results and then do something about it. And not from the top down, but allow all of our associates to participate. And then finally, being stewards in the community. we started a program 15 years ago called Crane on Board, where we really encourage, I won't use the word mandate, but we highly encourage our associates, our leaders, to join boards or to be a coach on a basketball team or leader of a church service or church workshop, to be involved in the community. It's for selfish reasons. We know, and you know, that when you're involved in something, you feel good about it. And you bring that back to the workplace. And you also learn. You learn from networking. You learn new skills. I've learned so much from my work at Ohio Health, from Huntington, from the Federal Reserve. I bring so much. My work with United Way. So we now have, I think we're up to about 75 board members on over 100 organizations in Columbus. And I only say that because we encourage all of companies to do that. It makes a significant difference. So now, we're really planning for the future. We really believe in long-term partnerships. In some respects, Crane Group operates like a private equity group because we look at acquisitions all the time. But we are different and we think unique because we really want long-term relationships. Whereas a private equity group, they have to satisfy shareholders and that are looking for returns in a 3 to 5 year scenario. Our shareholders are a family. We really look at the long view. So we're looking for companies to partner with us that have that same long view. And then finally, we want to make continued investment in the company. And I can't close without really talking about my happy place. And that is Reeb Avenue Center on the south side of Columbus that's now been open for about 3 years. And it is a community center for our neighbors with the goal to revitalize the South Side. Since our company was founded in the South Side, we believe so much that our South Side neighbors deserve everything that we have up in Westerville, we have in Upper Arlington and other places. Just because they're in a different zip code doesn't need to mean that they have different aspirations. And so within the Reeb Avenue Center, it is all about workforce training, whether it's second chances or someone who's been out of the workforce. But we have 14 nonprofits that focus on workforce development and education. So we have a state-of-the-art early learning center, of which we have board members here. It was called the Southside Learning Development Center. It's now called Shiloh Southside Early Learnings. So 112 to 15 kids every day from birth to 5 are there learning. And then we also have a Boys and Girls Club on the upper floor where we have 125 children every day from age 6 to 19 after school learning and feeling safe. And in the summers, we have a camp with over 200 kids. So every day in the center, there are over 300 people that are getting help or becoming educated. And on the lower level, we have many other services, including a fantastic cafe called the Roots Cafe. And it's a pay it as you can or pay it forward system. So if we have a resident who doesn't have the money to pay for a meal, if they're being helped in our facility, they can get a voucher. Otherwise, please come and have lunch. And they are requested to volunteer for an hour. So many of our neighbors are coming in, and maybe they come in for a meal, and then we're able to help them, whether care for their children, or a GED for themselves, or workforce training. So it is our happy place, and it's a place where we feel that collectively our partners are making a significant difference in the community. So with that, any questions? Yes?
So you talked about looking for new opportunity businesses that are going to be what's next. Are there businesses that you got rid of? Like making those choices, like you can't do everything. So what have you decided to do?
That is a great question. So in the 2008, 2009, so right during our Great Recession, we looked at our businesses and once again realized we're mostly in building products. And while we had diversified from just plastics, we were still pretty much wedded to that. So we actually brought in a Boston consulting group and really looked at one, what does our family want? So they did a lot of interviewing with all of our family members, our board, and our management team to say, where do we want to go? And everyone said we want to be more diversified. And so we looked at some of our key businesses, our siding business, our legacy plastics business, extrusion business, and even our then largest business, which became our TimberTech decking business. And through a long exercise, ended up divesting of our siding business, which had been with us forever. And that was the first time we ever sold a company. So that was very tough. It took a lot of discussion amongst our family members and our board members. We sold, I'll tell you, we made caveats. We said, okay, if we're going to sell a company, that company cannot move it, cannot let go any of our associates, have to stay and grow where they are. So our siding company was on the south side of Columbus, is on the south side of Columbus, and has been growing all these years. That was very important to us. We sold our TimberTech business, which was my baby. But our consultants were, really shared with us if that business in that category was going to grow, we had to double down or sell. And our family had made the decision we wanted to diversify. So we sold that business. Same thing. We were in Wilmington, Ohio. We had 300 associates. And Wilmington had just lost, yes. And so that community was suffering. So we made the same caveat. And so we found a company, kept it where it is, and now it's almost double in size. So we feel good about that. It was very difficult. And then finally, we sold our legacy Crane Plastics business to the management team. And so now they have 100%. It's still on the south side. It's still growing. So we are now no longer in plastics. Shocking. It is really shocking. So we did let go. We also sold off Suburban Steel Company to the owner, Signature Control. It just didn't fit our growth patterns. And the owner still owns that, and it's a family business. But that was very, very tough decisions. Anybody else? Nothing? Yes?
Talk a little bit more about community involvement. If someone really wants to get in and to do that, what are some of the first steps they should be taking? Or
I mean, as a company to get involved in the community?
or individuals?
Yeah, so what I love about Columbus, and John, maybe you've seen since you've been here, is the open doors. I mean, it's almost as if it's fresh blood, and because we have so many nonprofits that do such great work, I think, what we share with our folks is, first, what's your passion? What do you love? Is it the arts? Is it children? Is it a community? What is it that you really like to do? And then start doing some research about that. Now we have someone in our company that is the director of community philanthropy, so she helps navigate that. But it's picking up the phone. It's going online to see what work is being done there. And then it's looking at the board, looking at the board chair, or someone knows someone that's involved with YMCA or YWCA. And it literally is picking up the phone. I had a friend who I bike with who really wanted to get involved with Stonewall Columbus. And I said, just pick up the phone. I knew some members of the board, but I said, just call this person. People are welcoming. Everyone needs help. And you and our associates, everyone's got a skill set that is typically desperately needed in a nonprofit, whether it's marketing or finance, accounting, logistics, any type of skills, communication. So it's pretty easy. I think it's first finding out what you really want to do, because that's your contribution. Your contribution is your passion. And then, but I would say, my cautionary is, but do enough research to make sure that that organization is looking at what their governance is. Because there are some smaller boards that do a lot of in-the-weeds work because they have to. I mean, they have to get very, very involved. There are some boards, like a United Way, the larger, that the board does what typical boards do, which is talk about policy, and working with a CEO, and strategy. So there's all different levels of board work, and whatever suits you, just make sure that you do a little bit of work before you just dive in, because they'll eat you. I mean, they'll really, they'll be glad that you called. But you just have to make sure that you both do. It's back to fit, right? It's even with our back to fit, and if the culture fits, that's really important. Anybody else? Yeah, Willie.
One of the things I love that you mentioned at the start is having that experience in sales. If you could share why that is so important, and I reflect on something that was shared with me many years ago, that everyone should work retail. So it's refreshing to hear the focus on sales. It's really part of our everyday, right?
My dad would be very happy that you said that. And that's just his perspective. But I tend to, I've actually, we become our parents. I tend to share that with my children, what it did for me. So I worked for AT&T, and back in the days, we had we dressed, and women, in these little navy blue ties, navy blue suits, navy blue pumps, white press shirts, and we were videotaped all the time. So really, for me, what happened was, one was just the practice of being in front of people and learning the act of what it took to sell, because it's how we communicate to people, how you develop a relationship, and eventually how you influence, and then close a sale. So it's everyday life. What I realized after, working at a quick story with AT&T, my district was, or my area was motor vehicles and marinas, and my geography was the south side of Chicago. And I would call these car dealers up or these marinas, and they would tell me to meet them outside of this fenced area with their German Shepherd, and they'd escort me in. I'm like, oh my gosh. I would say, I love yellow roses to my group as I left. If something happens at my funeral, I'd love yellow roses. And I would be like shaking in my shoes as I'd be entering this. And then we'd be selling communication systems at that time were all regulated. So you couldn't play around with price. So it's like I was, everything I had to do was influence. And so it really taught me, one, how to influence, how to develop a relationship, and how to accept failure. I don't know how many times I'd be on the phone on the way back, calling my dad, saying, how'd you do? He would call me fancy. How'd you do, fancy? I'm like, I do so, I didn't close the deal, or in triumph when I did. And really learning how to pick yourself back up again and go back at it. So there were so many lessons in sales that for me, it was a really great start to my career. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned that your uncle still comes to work.
Oh, yes, I forgot that. Okay, and I know we have to finish up. This is one of my favorite stories. So Jim Crane is 93, and back 10, 15 years ago when I took his title from him, I always felt bad about it, but he retired 3 times. And now we're downtown on the south side, but he still comes in every day. I call it second shift. He arrives about between 1 and 2, has lunch at the Belmont Deli. He is the king of the Belmont, because I told you, he is so charismatic. Everyone loves him. And then he shuffles his way up to second floor to our office and comes in, and stays like 7 o'clock. He closes the place down. Nothing to do with work. He's emailing, jokes around, and bugging everyone. But about 5 years ago or so, my assistant and I were thinking about Jim and how he needed a title because he still came in. So we came up with a name, and Jim came in. We said, Jim, I have felt bad over all these years that I stole your title. So we have one for you. It is CMO. He said, he's smart. Chief Marketing Officer? I don't think so. I said, oh, no, much better than that. Chief Meddling Officer. Oh my gosh. He loved it so much, we made cards up for him. And he passes them out to people. So he now has his own title. He has the best office in the place. And we're so blessed to have him come in every day. In fact, at 2 o'clock, if he's not in, we start worrying a little bit. Because where's Jim? Because it is that continuity. And even our youngest associates love Jim Crane because he represents all that's good, all that foundation of Crane Plastics, but is still hip, you know, in the new world today and still loves interacting with everyone. So thanks for asking and closing the loop on that. Thank you so much for your time and indulging me in a little bit of the past and where we're going in the future. Thanks again.